Okay, Sergio, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've lived in District 8 my whole life. I grew up in El Paso, went to El Paso High School, Wiggs Middle School, Lamar Elementary. I have a degree, master's degree in economics, so I believe that I'm more prepared to deal with the economic issues that the city will be facing in the future, for sure, and the issues that the city's facing today.
Okay, so speaking of those financial issues that the city is facing right now,
Yes.
we're looking at probably a budget fight coming up here pretty soon. What are your thoughts on that process? What are are you looking at cuts? Are you looking at increases? What are you looking at?
Well, first of all, no one wants to see their taxes raised. So one of the last things I want to do is raise taxes. So then the big question comes, well then, you're probably going to have to cut something. Some of the things I've been looking to cut, would be the handouts that we give to multimillionaires in the city. A lot of tax incentives go to people who already have money and they can afford to start their own businesses. And I believe that as we give money away to people who don't really need it, you kill the entrepreneurial spirit. And the entrepreneurial spirit is really what's going to keep us going in the city. I believe in starting businesses for people. So the work that I've done with the Tigua Indians, we really help them start their own businesses and get going. And it's a testimony that as people start their own businesses and become entrepreneurs, they can kind of escape their cycle of poverty and poorness. If they're sitting there waiting for someone to give them a job, they're going to live off what someone tells them that they're worth instead of what they believe that they're worth. Nowadays, you can't live off of $15 an hour. You pay your rent, eat your food, things like that. So we need to encourage people to start their own businesses instead of giving businesses out to hire people.
What about the argument that people make that are supportive of those policies that say those type of incentives to businesses create jobs in El Paso?
Well, those type of incentives, it's all speculation. And the government can't be involved in speculating whether this business is going to create this many jobs or this business is not going to create this many jobs or this business is going to add this much economic input to the city or it isn't. And it's all based on speculation. The city cannot be speculating on whose business proposal is going to work and whose isn't, especially if you're asking for lots and lots of money. And we come with a small business plan and help small business owners again grow. Now the big companies that are saying we're going to create jobs and we're going to create a larger economic tax base, well, what ends up happening is that we give them money, but somebody has to pay. And we've noticed that as we give other people money, taxes increase. So the other guy is paying for this guy to come start his business on speculation, may I add. And the guy who wanted to start his business already had the money to begin with. How can you have a guy with $500 million sitting there asking for $5 million, $10 million? The guy has it. All he needs to do is reach into his own pockets and bring out the money. If he really cared for the city, he would be investing in it instead of asking the taxpayers for money. Now, we need to be focused on people who maybe don't have the resources and help them build their own businesses and their own entrepreneurial shift.
Well, that comment makes me think about someone like Paul Foster, who has contributed greatly to this community financially. In fact, basically helped finance the medical school. Yet he was also the recipient of some incentives to create a mall project. What do you do in a situation like that, where you have someone who has contributed greatly to El Paso, but then is also seeking to get some concessions in order to make take a financial risk?
Well, if you're sitting there contributing, good for you. You should be able to sleep proudly at night and feel really good about yourself for contributing. On the other hand, are you using the fact that you've contributed to now go ask people for money? The people who don't really have money, the city can't really afford to be funding his projects that may or may not work. I totally respect Paul Foster and everything he's done. The guy really started from almost nothing. He created $1 billion business here. And he didn't do that with government funds. He did that with his own savvy accounting skills.
Well, sure, but he wouldn't have that mall project without incentives from the city and county.
And that mall project is pure speculation.
Okay. Can we get there with just cuts alone, though? Are there other avenues that we need to be looking at?
I believe, again, maybe starting an entrepreneurial class of people. UTEP and the high schools are producing bunches of really intelligent people. As a teacher and as someone who works at UTEP, I speak to people, and they all have different business ideas, but they don't know how to start businesses.
Okay, so help me understand. So what you're saying is the city should put money into entrepreneurial ventures?
Not necessarily entrepreneurial ventures, but they should help mold entrepreneurs in the system.
How? What do you mean by that?
Well,
Like,
when I worked with the Tiwa Indians, a lot of the Tiwa Indians would come to the tribal government, and say, hey, I want to start a business, give me money. Well, it doesn't quite work like that. It works more like, hey, I have a business, give me some money. Wait, let me see your business plan first. Second of all, we're not here to give you money, but what we can do is we can help you find other resources that are there. There's
okay,
plenty.
so I'm just trying to really clarify what you're saying here. So you're saying that the city should point them in the right direction, or you're saying the city should contribute financially? What exactly are you
I think they should point them in the right direction.
Okay.
There's plenty of resources that aren't necessarily out of the city that are there. We could take advantage of the historically underutilized business label that we could give the businesses, which gives them a front line in dealing with
federal contracts,
and the state contracts too. I mean, they're there. We have a big base of Hispanic people and women that could get to the front of the line, but they know nothing about it. And I think the number one thing we have to do is educate people about how to use the historically underutilized business labels and how to find low interest loans, because there's plenty of low interest loans that are offered to the Small Business Administration. There's plenty of private organizations that are willing to fund small businesses.
I guess what I'm trying to understand is, how do you do that as a city rep?
As a city rep, well, you have to be willing to meet people, because people will come to your office and they will start asking.
Okay.
And I think as a city rep, you have to send them in the right direction. You can't just make promises and say, one thing I learned in working with the homeless and in social work is you can't make any promises to anybody, especially you can't be promising them money. If you promise the money, you don't come through, you make yourself look bad.
Sure. How do you feel about certificates of obligation?
Well, in a case of emergency, I guess, we do have to use it. Maybe a big flood hits and the city doesn't necessarily have the funds to fix the city. Well, we're going to have to take money from somewhere and find it. I believe the certificate of obligations can be used to finance smaller projects that will be for the benefit of the people in case of emergency. Because sometimes the funds just aren't there. So, we'd have to go building.
Some people are opposed to that because they say they're opposed to any kind of debt that's not voter approved.
Yes. Again, we could take it back to the big flood, the rainstorms that hit in 2006. Those are services that we needed immediately. Mm-hmm. And to get it on a voter referendum and to gather all the voters and then set a day for voting, it takes time, and these people need the services now. So in cases like natural disasters and other acts of God that we cannot control, I think certificates of obligations may be the right thing. But in other instances, maybe not.
What do you think is the most important issue facing your district?
The most important issue facing the district is just so big and so diverse.
Okay.
And I think the number one issue is in economic development may be the development of downtown.
Okay, and your position on that, your plan on that?
Is I believe that downtown needs density. There's a lot of empty buildings sitting there, and the people that own those buildings are again millionaires. I know some of those people, and they have lots and lots of money, and they have the money to go in and they have the money to fix those buildings, but they choose not to. On that note, and I'll get back to that in a minute, but I'm going to go back to the density issue. With the density, you'll have people living in those buildings. That'll create its own little economy. You'll have people demanding goods and services, electronics, groceries, clothes, things of the matter that they really need. And there's no, the government doesn't come in and dictate what businesses will start. I believe that the supply people will create its own demand. You can check out any dense area, and that's exactly what's happened. So,
okay, and the other point you were going to make?
About the business owners.
Right. So
what are we going to do about them living there? I think, it's not necessarily the city's job to get involved in that, but...
Well, actually, I would probably beg to differ. I mean, don't we have code enforcement for a reason?
And I believe those codes are good. We need to make it expensive for those business owners to not fix their buildings. So they look at it and go, you know what, it's costing me more money to keep my building in this state of disrepair. And what we need to do is maybe make it cheaper for them to go in and fix it. And then again, that goes to, well, aren't you supporting, the rich when they can afford to do their own thing? And to an essence, I guess it is that. But you really have to make it expensive for them not to fix it.
And so on that note, how do you feel about eminent domain?
Oh my God, eminent domain is probably one of the most abused things. Now, you know, the old school thinking of eminent domain was we could use it to build a highway or a park or something that's going to be for public benefit. But when it starts turning over to private benefit, it's basically the city again getting involved in speculation, and the city taking land from people who maybe, you know, don't necessarily need the land take. The city's already tried eminent domain. They tried to build Abraham's Fall Mansion building, and what happened on that? They ended up paying $700,000 for a $100,000 building. I mean, if you look on the records, the building's listed as being worth about $100,000, and they ended up paying $700,000. It gets expensive in legal fees.
Sure.
You know, and we can't be doing that for every building we want to take. I am totally against eminent domain abuse, especially when you have the properties being turned over to private hands and not for public use.
Okay, final question. If you were on a doorstep right now talking to a voter who was undecided about who they were going to vote for in this election, what would you tell them?
Well, I would let the voter know that right now we're at a very important crossroads in the history of El Paso. As we drive further, we've been noticing that the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. And I'll be the voice that the average person is seeking. And you know, and then of course I'll give them my information that I have. And you know, I've been to the door and I've actually had to give a long, detailed explanation to people. But I mean, for the most part, I'll be the voice of the average person.
All right.